Today we're taking a look at the things you can do if you've been contacted by one source enforcement services. We're getting all of this information straight from my article on MoneyNerd.co.uk, which I'll also link in the description. So just to be clear, I'm not a financial advisor, I don't give financial advice, I'm just making sure that you have access to the information that you need so you can make an informed decision. So you've probably received a letter from one source enforcement services or even had them knocking at your door. When I was being chased by debt collectors, it caused me a lot of stress and anxiety, to be honest, plenty of sleepless nights. But since then I've worked in the credit card industry for over 10 years, and I'm happy to say that I've been able to use the information contained in this video to become debt-free. So today I'm answering 5 frequently asked questions, like are one source enforcement services even legitimate? What's the difference between a bailiff and a debt collector? Can one source enforcement services force entry into your house? Can they take things from your home? And what happens if you're expecting a visit? So question number 1 is, are one source enforcement services legitimate? If you've received a letter from them in the post, this is probably your first question. If you don't recognise the name, then the first thing you should do is check that they're legitimate. First, the letter should have your correct name, your correct address, and the correct information about the debt that you owe. The letter should also notify you at least 7 days in advance of them visiting you. Next, you need to check if one source enforcement services are registered as a bailiff. To check this, you can check the bailiff's register, which is online, and you can either use it using the search bar, or you can click the link below the search bar and look at the list of all of the registered bailiffs in the UK. You should be able to find one source enforcement services on that list, and once you've determined that they are legitimate, you can move on to confirming that the debt is valid. Once you've determined that one source enforcement services is legitimate, you can move on to confirming that the debt is valid. If you know that the debt has already been paid, then the debt is known as invalid. If that's the case, I'd recommend that you contact the company and inform them that the debt has already been paid, and you should also send evidence of that payment. This process can take a little time, so in the meantime ask them to freeze your account so they don't show up at your door in the meantime. But for now, let's assume that the debt is valid, and we'll move on to the next common question, which is, what is the difference between a bailiff and a debt collector? Well, debt collectors and bailiffs are very different. They both want to collect your debt, but they have different legal rights. So it's important to know whether you're in contact with a bailiff or a debt collector. The most important thing to know is, whilst a debt collector can visit your home, unlike bailiffs, they can't enter your house without you giving them permission to do so, and they certainly can't take anything. Question number 3 is, as a bailiff, can one source enforcement services force entry into your house? There's so much confusion around this, and to be honest, it's been pretty dramatised by films and TV. So what's the reality? Well, So what's the reality? Will they actually get down? Question number 3. As a bailiff, can one source enforcement services force entry into your house? There's so much confusion around this, and to be honest, it's been pretty dramatised by films and TV. So what's the reality? Can they actually kick down your door and demand money? The truth is that even if one source enforcement services show up at your door, you only have to let them in if they're allowed to force entry. This depends on the type of the debt that you owe. Normally, they can only do this for magistrate court fines and tax debts. So when they show up, be sure to ask them if they're allowed to force entry. They should be able to show you a warrant or a writ alongside court information with the details of your debt. Once that's determined, there's still no circumstances where they can actually kick down the door or smash a window like in the movies. Bailiffs can only use reasonable force to enter, which means if they can't get in, they'll have to call a locksmith to get through the door. Just to be clear, for most debts, bailiffs can't actually force their way into your home. It depends on the type of your debt. Debts like credit card debt, catalogue debt, unpaid parking tickets don't give the rights for bailiffs to force entry into your home. So make sure you're aware of what type of debt that you owe. Next question is, can one source enforcement limited take things from your home? This is another question that causes a lot of fear. Here's what you need to know. One source bailiffs can seize possessions from your home in order to secure the debt, but they can't just take anything. They can't take anything belonging to your children or your partner or anyone who doesn't actually owe the debt. They can't take your pets, they can't take anything that you need to fulfill your basic domestic needs like washing machine or your mobile phone or your cooker. They also can't take things that you need to work or study with, as long as the value of the item is less than £1,350. Now, they can take your car if you don't use it for work, but they can't take your car if you use it as a mobility vehicle or if you have a blue badge. Probably more important than anything is that you understand what will happen when One Source Enforcement Services comes to your home. For many people, this is the most stressful part of not really knowing what's going on. So here's what you can expect. When they arrive, they won't take anything straight away. Instead, they'll be making an inventory. They'll be working out what they can take and what they can't take, and the rough values of the items that they can take. This is called taking control of your goods. If you're unable to make payments towards your debt, they'll come back and then seize those items on the list, and they'll sell them to pay your debt. You're allowed to review the list and ask them to remove items that you don't believe should be on it, so don't let them leave without reviewing that list. Next, you'll need to agree on a monthly repayment plan for your debts. You shouldn't sacrifice basic living costs and essential expenditure in order to pay off your debt. And don't feel like you need to be pressured into paying anything more than you can reasonably afford. If you feel that One Source is asking you to pay more than you can afford, you should provide proof of the income and your expenditures, and in most cases that will work. One Source Enforcement Services will be hoping to leave your house with an agreement signed and in place, which is a lot of pressure on you. That's why I always say as soon as you receive a notice that One Source Enforcement Services will be coming to your home, you should seek independent, free advice so you'll be totally prepared when they arrive. There's nothing more powerful than being prepared and having that knowledge to deal with these situations. I'll leave a link to some of the best UK charities that you can contact to prepare. Now, there's a number of ways you might be able to reduce the amount you repay. There's a bunch of free debt solutions and paid debt solutions. Each of them have their pros and cons. If you want to learn more about these debt solutions, then I'll leave a link in the description to my website.